Good morning. Today we are going to talk about sexually transmitted infections. So, in this lesson, you are going to understand that disease causing organisms can be transmitted between parents during sexual activity, and you are going to name some organisms responsible for sexually transmitted infections. But before, we have to know what do we mean by sexually transmitted infections, STIs. Actually, STIs are disease organisms that, that are passed from one person to another during sexual contact. So these diseases are most likely to be transmitted by body fluids through sexual contact. So, STIs are disease organisms that are passed from one person to another during sexual contact. Okay. So the question now is, what do individuals, communities, and worldwide have to do to control STI? So let's start with individuals. Actually, they must take care with sexual habits. So individuals should know the sexual history of their partners, and they have to use a condom for period protection, and they have to have a medical check if any symptoms occur. So they should have a medical check if any symptoms occur. So those are the three things that individuals should do to control STIs. Let's see communities. Actually, communities must offer testing and treatment by individuals are at greatest risk can be offered testing for HIV. And HIV means human immunodeficiency virus, and it's a retrovirus that causes AIDS. So, individuals at greatest risk can be offered testing for HIV. What about the second point? Sexual contacts can be traced to identify sources of infection. So to identify the source of infection, the community will trace the sexual contacts. Okay, what about worldwide? Actually, worldwide involvement can include education programs to prevent infection. So they can produce or make education programs to prevent infection, and they can provide of antibiotics provision or provide of antibiotics, and they can develop of vaccines and antiviral drugs. So they have to develop vaccines. Okay. Now we have actually STIs can be caused by three microorganisms, which are bacteria, the first picture for bacteria, the second one viruses, and the last one fungi. Okay, we are going to discuss the causes and the effects of two infections, which are gonorrhea and AIDS. Here we have two infections, STIs, which are gonorrhea and AIDS. Now, gonorrhea, you have to know before everything that gonorrhea is caused by a bacterium and AIDS is a viral STIs. Now we are going to watch this video to extract the main symptoms of gonorrhea. So let's watch this video.
Of the many sexually transmitted infections, or STIs, gonorrhea is the second most common. The most common STI is chlamydia. Chlamydia. And we'll talk more about chlamydia later. Right now let's focus on gonorrhea and why these two happen together. These two diseases often occur together for two reasons. First, they have similar risk factors, which include things like having multiple sexual partners and or having frequent unprotected sex. The other reason is that infection with one of these bugs makes your body susceptible to a second infection by dampening the immune system. So I promise we'll go into more detail about chlamydia later, but for now let's talk more about gonorrhea. It's caused by a bug referred to as Neisseria gonorrhoeae. And the reason why we call gonorrhea a sexually transmitted infection is because it undergoes this process referred to as transmission, where it moves from one person to another by several mechanisms. Most commonly, gonorrhea will be transmitted through sex, which can include oral sex, vaginal sex, or even anal sex. Another important mechanism of transmission includes childbirth, and we'll talk more about the outcomes of that in a minute. So these are the main ways that gonorrhea can be transmitted. So let's move this off to the side, and let's focus instead on my poor friend over here, who's going to have all the different signs and symptoms a person can get with gonorrhea. Now, because we said the main way gonorrhea spreads from one person to the other is by sex, let's start by focusing on signs and symptoms at our sexual organs. So here you can see on the left I have female genitalia drawn out, and on the right side we have male genitalia drawn here. So if we were to imagine our gonorrhea infection, so I'll use this as sort of a way to mimic gonorrhea as it spreads. Perhaps you can have a female infecting a male with gonorrhea, and so because the penis is used during sex, that can actually seed or spread up the urethra. So this yellow line here, that is your urethra. And we'll go into this in more detail in another video, but the gonorrhea bacteria will latch on to the walls in your urethra. Your urethra is lined by epithelial cells, and so this bacterium will enter those cells. That will trigger an immune response. Your white blood cells will detect that something is wrong, and they'll come up to the urethra through the bloodstream to attack wherever the gonorrhea has spread. So if the gonorrhea has only entered a single epithelial cell in your urethra, it'll cause that cell to die in a process that's referred to as apoptosis. Maybe you've heard of it. It's where the body specifically decides to kill a cell because it's doing something wrong or it's been infected, like in this case. Now, in the ideal world, the white blood cell will kill off this one epithelial cell in the urethra that's been infected, and we'd be done with the infection. But oftentimes there are multiple organisms that kind of spread along the urethral tract, which cause more white blood cells to come from the bloodstream to attack the bacteria or the cells that are infected, and as a result you get inflammation. Inflammation of the urethra, causing things like pain when you urinate, maybe some burning that's there as well, and general discomfort. So because of the bacterium, your urethra will cause you a lot of pain, and you've got what's referred to as urethritis. If the gonorrhea spreads up here to your prostate, this pink thing is your prostate, you can get what's called prostatitis. And this inflammatory process that's occurring along the way causes white blood cells that may die and epithelial cells that will also undergo apoptosis with some of the gonorrheal bacteria to slough off and fall through and come out from the urethral meatus, or the end of the penis. And you can actually see pus coming out of the penis. Now, just like the epithelial cells within your urethra, gonorrhea can also affect the epithelial cells that line the anus, or even higher up here in the rectum. As a result, you might not see pus coming out from the anus, and instead you might see infections of the cells that line the anus or of the anus. And so this skin infection you'd see here are referred to as pustules. Pustules. And again, that's from the gonorrheal bacteria infecting the epithelial cells of the anus. You can also have pustules occur in the female, so let's label that right here, as well as urethritis. But because of the difference in anatomy between the male and the female, you may also see an infection of the vagina, or vaginitis. More commonly, though, infected women will have pain during sex because of pressure that's put on the cervix, due to the gonorrhea that's spread there, causing cervicitis. Cervicitis. Gonorrhea can spread even further up from the cervix through the uterus and actually come out the fallopian tubes to cause an infection within the pelvic cavity, which is why it's called pelvic inflammatory disease. Pelvic inflammatory disease, or PID. Now, from the genital tract, gonorrhea can spread into the bloodstream and go elsewhere in the body. And quite classically, it goes to your joints, like the knee over here, to cause arthritis by infecting the joint capsule. So down below here, you can see the joint capsule. Here's bone, here's articular cartilage, and this is synovial fluid, or just some fluid in between the two bones and the joint. So if gonorrhea spreads here, think about what else is going to come right after it.
So, in this video, he gave too much details for the gonorrhea, but the main things that you have to know, that gonorrhea usually transmits by penetrative sex. And what do we mean by penetrative sex? Actually, when the penis enters the vagina, mouth, or anus. They call them in the video oral, vaginal, or anal, by using vagina, mouth, or anus. Now, the symptoms of gonorrhea. The symptoms of gonorrhea, actually, the first one, pain or burning when passing urine. And the second thing, a creamy discharge from the penis or vagina. Creamy discharge from the penis or vagina. And the last thing, inflammation of the testicles or testes. Those are the symptoms that appear for the STIs, gonorrhea person. What about the treatment? Actually, the last thing here, to treat gonorrhea, you have to involve a course of antibiotics. You have to take a course of antibiotics because it's a bacterial disease, and bacterial disease treat by a course of antibiotics depending on the type of disease, actually. Okay, what about the second STI, which is AIDS? Actually, you know that it's a viral disease. AIDS, it's a viral disease caused by viruses. Let's watch this video about viruses too, about AIDS, to understand it. Okay, focus with video.
HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus. If you have HIV, you have an infection that damages your immune system over time and causes AIDS. AIDS stands for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome. It is the final stage of an HIV infection when your immune system is damaged and too weak to fight off ordinary infections. When foreign invaders, such as bacteria and viruses, get into your body, they can cause infections. These events activate your body's defenses. The white blood cells of your immune system are part of your body's defenses. One type of white blood cell, called helper T lymphocytes, or helper T cells, strengthen your immune system's response to infection in two ways. First, helper T cells release chemicals that attract other white blood cells to the site of the infection. These additional white blood cells attack the invading bacteria or virus, as well as other infected cells. Second, helper T cells release chemicals that cause other white blood cells to multiply. These new white blood cells create markers called antibodies, which can identify the same foreign invader throughout your body. Antibodies attach to the bacteria or virus, marking them as targets for your immune system to destroy them. If you have HIV, it travels through your blood and other body fluids to infect and kill certain white blood cells. the virus enters helper T cells, which are the primary target. Once inside, the virus makes many copies of itself. As these virus particles are made, they leave the damaged helper T cell to infect other cells. The T cell loses its ability to protect the body from the ongoing infection and dies. In this way, HIV spreads and kills more of your helper T cells, weakening your immune system. As a result, other types of infections are able to take advantage of your body's inability to defend itself. These infections are called opportunistic infections. If you have an HIV infection and one or more opportunistic infections, you have AIDS. Some of the common AIDS-related opportunistic infections are inflammation of the tissues covering your brain and spinal cord, called meningitis, inflammation of your brain, called encephalitis, respiratory illnesses, such as pneumonia and tuberculosis, intestinal illnesses, such as chronic diarrhea caused by infectious parasites, and cancers, such as Kaposi's sarcoma and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. HIV passes from person to person through infected body fluids. HIV can enter your body during unprotected sex, while sharing drug injection needles, during your own childbirth, while breastfeeding from your mother, or from contaminated blood or blood products. Although there is no cure for HIV, drugs called antiretroviral medications can reduce the amount of HIV in your body. One class of antiretroviral medication, called entry or fusion inhibitors, disrupts the HIV infection process by preventing the virus from attaching to your cells. Other classes of antiretroviral medications include reverse transcriptase inhibitors, protease inhibitors, and integrase inhibitors. These drugs prevent the creation, assembly, and spread of new viruses. Your doctor may prescribe a combination of these drug classes known as highly active antiretroviral therapy, or HAART. Antiretroviral medication doesn't completely remove HIV from your body, but slows it down enough to enable your immune system to fight infections. Regular blood tests will let your doctor know how effective your antiretroviral medication is in controlling HIV. If the number of helper T cells is high enough in your blood sample, your medication is working. Treatments for the opportunistic infections of AIDS are medications specific for each type of infection. For example, your doctor may prescribe antibiotics if you have pneumonia or tuberculosis.
So, actually AIDS, as we said, it's caused by virus, HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. Actually, the symptoms for this STI, AIDS, a flu-like illness in the early stage. Many AIDS-related conditions may follow as the immune system begins to fail. Fungal infections of the lungs, or for example, here the virus reduces the number of lymphocytes and decreases the ability to produce antibodies. So this virus is very dangerous because it decreases the ability to produce antibodies and also reduces the number of lymphocytes. What about the transmission? How this virus transmits? Actually, unprotected sex with an infected person can transmit the AIDS, and contact with an infected person's blood. The third one, from mother to child during pregnancy or childbirth. And the last one, by sharing syringes while injecting drugs. What about the treatment? Actually, there is no cure for this virus. Antiviral treatments only slows down the progression from HIV status to full-blown AIDS. Modern treatments inhibit the enzymes which the virus uses to copy itself. So inhibit the enzymes with which the virus uses to copy itself. So here there's no copying for the virus, so that the virus will stop producing new viruses in the body. Okay, so we have finished this lesson 3.13. Please, after studying this lesson and the previous lesson, you are going to answer the next worksheet. I'm gonna send worksheet B12. After studying those two lessons, please answer it. Thank you for listening and good luck.